Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I am Andrew Sumner. This is Garth Ennis. And we are here to talk about what must be, mate, a dream project for you. Surely, I can't think of anything that hits the definition of Garth Ennis' dream project more than this curated piece of work that you're doing for our friends at Rebellion. So what can you tell me about it, mate?
Well, I think you're spot on, Andrew. I mean, battle means more to me than almost any other comic of that era or any comic at all, really. And I think that's largely because it's the unsung hero, it's the underdog. 2000 AD is an institution, action lives on its reputation, but battle was the one that really kicked the door down, that got everything started, that started that Pat Mills, John Wagner run of success that meant a revolution in British comics. And so how this came about was I really enjoyed working for and reading the battle and action specials that came out in 2020.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get the sense there was going to be any more anytime soon. And if I have an agenda in all this, it is, as I say, celebrating this comic that means so much to me that I think is otherwise gone by the wayside for so many people. And I want to remind people, or if they don't even know in the first place, tell them about battle, about the guys who worked on it, the characters who appeared in it, the boundaries that were broken, the doors that were kicked down by people like Pat Mills and John Wagner, yes, but also Tom Tully and Jerry Finley Day, Alan Hebden, Chris Lauder, artists like Cam Kennedy and John Cooper and Joe Colquhoun and Mike Western, Mike Dory, you know the list.
Yeah.
So that's really what lies behind all this. Me wanting to keep this stuff alive and seeing that credit does go where it's due. Reminding people that there was this comic that did so much to move things along for the medium back in the 70s and 80s. And that's what the Battle Action Special is all about.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, and we've worked together on some projects in the past that are in this wheelhouse. This is something that's very close to my heart also. So the fact that what I love about it is not just the fact that you're working on it, but you're curating it in a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually writing all the stories in this. Yeah.
That's right. When I thought about the as I mentioned, the battle and action specials and realizing that there wasn't going to be any more anytime soon, I thought, well, what if you made it happen? What if you just pitched it? And I thought about battle and action. And then I realized that when I first read Battle, it was actually called Battle Action. It was right after that time when action had ultimately failed and was folded into Battle. And you therefore had this new comic, Battle Action, and there began for Battle under that title a period of what I've called in the introduction to the thing intense creativity. You suddenly have this period, and it remains Battle Action. It goes out under that title for about 3.5 years, so they're in no rush to give up the action tag. Even though at the end it's quite small on the cover.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me that this was the greatest, most creative period in Battle's history, because all its best strips either continue in that period, like the Sarge, like Johnny Red, or begin during that period. Charlie's War, I think, starts about a year after action joins Battle. You have HMS Nightshade, you have The General Dies at Dawn and Fighting Man and Death Squad and Crazy Keller. There's even a reprint of Darky's Mob in that period. And that was when I was reading Battle. And that to me is when the best material saw print. And I thought, that's the angle. We'll call it Battle Action because that's what it was called when I first read it. And in fact, in its heyday. And we'll have a mixture of strips. We'll have some of the best battle strips. And we'll have some of the action strips from the period when action was folded into Battle. And I thought we'll also maybe have something that allows direct commentary on the demise of action, which of course caused this merger to happen in the first place. And that's how I came up with the idea. 7 strips written by me with art by the best guys we could possibly get. Hence the Battle Action Special, launching in June, I believe.
Fantastic, mate. And what can you tell me about the launching in June, and when this airs, will be available for pre-order from the links attached to this conversation in the usual glorious manner. So what can you tell me about those 7 strips, what they are, and who's doing the artwork with you?
All right. So the first this is a bit of an obvious one, Johnny Red.
Of course.
My favorite character of the comic, really, of the era. One that I revived before a few years ago.
Yeah.
With the same artist, I'm happy to say, Keith Burns. Couldn't really be anybody else. I mean, the guy is the war comics artist, as far as I'm concerned. He's a member of the British Guild of Aviation Artists. There's no one better for this. There's no one else who could do it. Not really.
No, he's got it in his DNA, totally.
Yes, he does. He does. What I've done with that one is I had a bit of fun with this. There's another character, another story in battle from that period called Skreamer of the Stukas.
Yeah. And
it's about a nasty piece of work called Otto Skreamer, who flies the German Stuka dive bomber. And it was quite a short strip. It was about 15 episodes long, but it was really the weekly adventures of a complete bastard. And it could often be quite entertaining, actually. And I thought, why not have a Johnny Red Skreamer of the Stukas crossover? I suppose it harkens back to the old Major Easy Rat Pack team up that they had in battle at the time.
Well, I'm all over this concept, by the way. I if you hadn't said that, it would have been exactly part of my question. So I'm totally feeling what you're doing. Yeah,
it's there are old battle strips that I'm fond of, but I can't really make an argument for as being particularly worthwhile. Skreamer is a lot of fun, but it's really a sort of one gag strip. How appalling can Skreamer be this week as our irritatingly plucky hero yet again fails to stop him from wreaking havoc on the world. So that's the Johnny Red strip. We'll see Skreamer, Otto Skreamer's Stuka squadron on the Russian front run into Johnny Red's Falcon squadron. The second strip is the Sarge, the old Jerry Finley Day, Mike Western classic, and PJ Holden's drawing that. And that is, the Sarge was always a bit of a favorite of mine, I think, and this goes back to a conversation you and I had previously. I think because it wasn't a typical war story about a squad of guys, because we usually, when we think of those, it's usually a special unit, a special forces unit, commandos, highly trained individuals, secret missions. This was about, in modern parlance, a bunch of grunts.
Yeah.
Just a 10-man British infantry squad, or section, as it was known, under the command of the veteran Sergeant Jim Masters and his kind of ongoing struggle to keep them alive. So it's the story very much revisits all the old characters, but there's a sort of a commentary to an extent, I suppose, on characters like that and on soldiers like that in the real world. Very much the British citizen soldier, not the dedicated military professional, but the conscript.
Yeah.
The guy who found himself called up, often against his will, put in uniform, put in the line, and expected to get on with it. You're a soldier now and you're fighting the Nazis. Good luck. Oh, okay. So that's the Sarge.
Exactly my grandfather Pop Smide's experience, by the way. That is exactly his life in the military. Yeah,
it's time to fight for king and country. Oh, right. Okay. Nobody asked me.
Sure? Yeah.
The third story is Crazy Keller, which
brilliant.
is a favorite of mine. That was one I loved as a kid, and yet it's sort of gone by the wayside. People seem to respond more to Major Easy.
Well, they're
who
not
were
in dissimilar wheelhouses, are they?
not at all. They're very similar. They're both were created by Alan Hebden. Easy with art by Carlos Esquerra, Keller with art by Eric Bradbury. Both are rogues, loners. I was going to say malcontents, but that's not really true. But they're somewhat idiosyncratic. You know, they're unlike other soldiers. They're both inspired by characters from movies of the time. You know, the sort of quirky stuff that was popular in the 70s. I was never a major Easy fan. There was something about the character that never really worked for me. Keller, on the other hand, makes more sense. He's a U.S. Army signals captain. He's also essentially a black marketeer.
Yeah.
So he's in it for himself, but he does manage to do a good deal of damage to the German army while he's going about his nefarious business. So he's a wheeler dealer, really. Very dark sense of humor to this strip. Alan Hebden was known for a sort of a wry commentary on things in a lot of his work, and it comes through strongly in Keller. He drove a Jeep, a very heavily armed Jeep called Scoot 4, which was the replacement for Scoot 3, which was lost in unfortunate circumstances. And one of the running jokes in the strip was, you never asked Keller what had happened to Scoots 1 and 2 because he would lose the head. So together on riding Scoot 4 and with his long-suffering assistant Ariel Arkin, Crazy Keller makes his way through the Second World War, trying to turn a fast buck wherever he can, but never forgetting to do the Germans as much harm as he possibly can while he's doing it. So I'm pleased to say I got Chris Burnham on the art for this one.
Yeah, brilliant.
And he has proven to be a revelation, actually. He's done an absolutely incredible job. Amazing storyteller. This is one of those strips that sort of proceeds at 90 miles an hour with all guns blazing, and he instantly realized, understood that perfectly, and he's done a tremendous job. After that, we get Dredger.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go. We go from battle to action. And we have John Higgins on the art there.
Great.
And this is a story set in 1980. This is the one that's least like the others. It's a very badly behaved, very rude strip in which battle actions answer to what? Dirty Harry plus the Sweeney plus the Ipcress file uncovers a nefarious plot in 1980s London and sets about tracking down the miscreants involved. And London barely survives the experience, so you can guess what happens to the miscreants. This is a very badly behaved strip, I can tell you, and John Higgins was perfect for it.
And quite rightly so for Dredger, who was, even in his own time, a very badly behaved character. And
yes,
that's written into his DNA, right?
He was, yeah, very much so. I think I say in the intro to it, as he's a man of his time, and it was a time lucky to survive the man, because that was very much the kind of character Dredger was. You know, like why use a gun when you can use a hand grenade? Why punch someone when you can drive a JCB over their head? That kind of thing. So lots of bad behavior in that one. And then we stay with action for the next strip, but more familiar territory. This is Hellman of Hammer Force. And I'm pleased to say I've got Mike Dory back on the art on this one. He drew the Hellman strip I did for the Action Special a couple of years ago. Real pleasure to work with Mike on this course, because he is the original Hellman artist, you know, in action and in battle. Another crossover here, there was a battle strip called Glory Rider, and it was about an American tank unit in which our hero, our somewhat ineffectual hero, Sergeant Steve Hiltz, realizes that Colonel Jeb Ryder, in charge of the American tank regiment, is really only in it for himself. He's out for glory. He wants to advance his own path to promotion, to adulation, to medals, and he doesn't care how many of his own men get killed doing it. So it seemed to me like an obvious choice, just as Johnny Red and Skreamer of the Stukas are both aviation strips. Hellman and Glory Rider are both armored warfare strips. So it's time for tank versus tank. And of course, Hellman being by far the more experienced tank commander, at least initially, has the upper hand. After that, we've got, and this is the weird one. This is the one I described as being like the others, but not. Kids Rule Okay.
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
Now this is not so much a continuation of the old Kids Rule Okay strip. This is included as a kind of commentary on what happened to action, because of course the famous Kids Rule Okay cover by Carlos Esquerra with the kid swinging a chain at what appears to be a cop, and that's more complicated than it appears, of course, if you know the action story. That was one of the things, one of the elements that was believed to have caused action's downfall, that cover. So my story is kind of a commentary on that, and perhaps you might say a continuation of the story that cover begins. This all sounds very mysterious, but it will become clear when you read it, I promise. And I'm delighted to say that the art on that is by Kevin O'Neill.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, say no more.
Yeah, I really don't have to. I mean, it's Kevin O'Neill. Yeah. I mean, I remember being 11 and reading Nemesis the Warlock for the first time, and my eyes bulging out of my skull at just the sheer degree of insane creativity by Mills and O'Neill. And so it's a real treat to have him draw one of my strips now.
It must be a treat and a half. I mean, Kevin O'Neill, famously one of the few people, and maybe I think I'm getting the details right, to submit a Green Lantern story that ultimately got banned just for the sheer lynching craziness of his artwork, right?
I think, as far as I know, he even goes one better. He's the only artist ever to have his entire style deemed unacceptable by the Comics Code Authority. I think when DC turned the art in, or turned the story into the Comics Code, they were told, no, we're not passing this, and we don't want you to send us any more art by this artist.
There's nothing that you can do to fix this.
Yeah.
I love it.
And you really can't beat that. Nice one, Kevin.
Yeah.
So that was a real treat. And then the last story in the special is another odd one in a way. For the first time, the supporting character from Johnny Red, and my favorite supporting character from the strip, Nina Petravan, gets her own story. It's called Nina Petravan and the Angels of Death, and it's about the woman night bomber squadron that featured so heavily in the Johnny Red strip. The Angels of Death was the Germans' nickname for this squadron. They're based on the real life night witches.
Who you've also written about, yeah.
Which I've also written about, yeah. Really, Russia was the only country to put women into combat in the mainstream military, not partisans or whatever, although they did that too. But women served as soldiers, snipers, machine gunners, medics. They served as tank crew. They served as fighter pilots and bomber pilots. And one small group flew tiny, frail, ancient biplanes on night bombing missions against the Germans. Tom Tully, the creator of Johnny Red, fictionalized them as the Angels of Death, and he made their commander Captain Nina Petravan, and she became one of Johnny Red's greatest, if not the greatest, supporting character. So I've finally given her her own strip. The art is by Patrick Goddard. He's done a fantastic job. And in a way, the Johnny Red and Nina Petravan strips sort of top and tail the special, because there's a story element from the Johnny Red story that the Nina Petravan story kind of picks up on and completes. So you'll see Skreamer make a reappearance there, much to his chagrin, I can tell you. I think it begins something like, when Falcon Squadron turn in for the night, the woman's 7th Air Reconnaissance Regiment goes to work, and you see the angels of death at briefing and then getting into their terrible little biplanes and going off into the night to visit the Germans in the worst possible way. And that's your 7. That's what you
Brilliant.
get. Yeah.
That's great. It's like the ultimate war anthology comic, the perfect war anthology movie that doesn't exist. What I love is the fact that you've like taken some of those, American publishing licks of like teaming everybody up and taking bits and pieces out, which is, if you're into this stuff, as we both are, if you've got a long history with these characters, just seeing them interact is one of those simple pleasures that can't be underestimated. You know what I mean? I'm really looking forward to it, mate. Because I'm a lifelong Battle fan, and just seeing you pull all this together with that great roster of artists you've got, and is a real treat, I think. And it must feel like a real treat for you.
Yeah, it is. It feels good to do this because, as I say, Battle is the underdog in all of this. And I do want to remind people that it existed, that these guys did this work, that Tom Tully and Joe Colquhoun and John Cooper, for instance, created such a fantastic character and strip with Johnny Red, that all this important work was done. I don't want that particular legacy to fade. I don't want those guys' reputations to go by the wayside. I want it to be known that this comic did exist and these guys did incredible work on it, and it's a vital part of British comics history, because no battle, or at Battlefield, no action, so no 2000 AD.
Yeah, right.
This is where it all began.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. I think it's important work you're doing with this book, and it's available for pre-order right here, as is a bunch of Garth's other great war stuff. You can order it right here from the links attached to the conversation. And I'm genuinely excited. To see you excited about it, mate. And I'm genuinely excited to get my copy and read it. Can't wait. So I'm very pleased that you're doing it, and I'm sure everybody tuning in, all your war book fans, will be over the moon.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's enough in there for people who perhaps have less of an interest in war comics and more of an interest in the history of British comics, but also in terms of what they're capable of today, because we have a strong tradition in British comics that has perhaps not always been well served. A lot of this stuff has gone by the wayside, and it should. I think it does merit a revival. I tried to think carefully about the strips that were written by people who aren't as well known. I mentioned Tom Tully, but also Jerry Finlay Day and Alan Hebden. It's Pat and John, their legacies are set in stone. These guys, though, I think they deserve to be better known. And as I say, if you're not normally interested in war comics, you may find that these stories take a slightly different slant on them. After all, Battle in Action, or actually Battle, really, in this instance, while it is a war comic, and it did lead me to my own interest in military history and ultimately to write my own war comics, it was very much a thing of its time. The stories do have a strong streak of hyperbole running through them. They are one step further away from the reality of combat and so on than a lot of the regular war stories I write. So you're going to find maybe a bit more kind of daring do and adventure and slightly outlandish material in these stories than you might have come to expect from me.
Well, as a lifelong lover of and adherent to hyperbole, I think the fact that you've been able to play around, because they are very much, as you say, their own thing. And I was aware when I was a teenager reading these books that they had their own sensibility, and it's not really like anything else. And as you say, the guys associated with the explosion of 2000 AD, they've been very well served by history. But the three scripters you mentioned, I mean, these guys were the engine room of IPC, the engine room of Fleetway, and they just did brilliant work, across 2 decades, into the 80s, And if you go back to some of the other things I love from the 60s, you know, the books like the Steel Claw and whatnot, you'll find those guys at the heart of all of those books as well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so
These guys, you could say they sort of bridged that gap.
yeah,
You know, Pat and John are obviously visionaries. They're doing things like Charlie's War and Darky's Mob and HMS Nightshade. But someone like Tom Tully creates Johnny Red, and that is the backbone of Battle for a good chunk of its run.
Yeah. And quite rightly so. Again, we're talking about the Battle Action Special coming soon from Rebellion, available here. And thanks for taking me through the whole thing, Garth. I can't wait to read it, mate.
I hope you'll enjoy it. I think for people who like this sort of thing, I think it will deliver.
Well said, brother. I'll hold you to that. And I'll see you on the other side of it. We'll see you back here soon, mate. And take care of yourself.
All right. Cheers, Andrew. Thank you.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.